Hey everyone. So today I thought it would be a great idea to talk about this highly controversial but complicated for Bitcoiners who are pretty new to Bitcoin topic, which is Bitcoin Core versus Bitcoin Nuts. So today I want to try to boil it down to a very simple language so you kind of get the understanding what they actually are, and if Bitcoin is in danger, if there's anything you can do to protect Bitcoin or not, and what this is all about. So I'm going to start with very, very fundamental things that you need to get clear in your head before even trying to understand this debate, okay? So essentially, to boil this topic down, you need to understand how Bitcoin works technically, right? And this is obviously very complicated, but I'm going to oversimplify it to make sure that the fundamental understanding is there. And from there, we can build on the different types of versions of Bitcoin and so on and so forth, and the debate, okay? So first of all, what you need to understand is obviously that Bitcoin is simply a piece of software, okay? So it's a piece of software that anybody in the world can download and anybody in the world can run on their computer, okay? Now, it does not mean that you're running that software if you have a hardware wallet. Okay, this is the confusing part. So I see a lot of people come into Bitcoin, they buy Bitcoin, they even get their own hardware wallet, and then they withdraw their coins into their wallet, and then they think they're now running Bitcoin. Okay, you are using Bitcoin, but you're not running it. Okay, let me explain what that means. So the software itself, Bitcoin, is basically a software that contains the data of every transaction of the network on your computer, okay? So if you're, for example, using Sparrow or any software that you use to use your hardware wallet, okay? Trezor or Ledger Live or any of these softwares that you're using, they are connected to somebody's copy of the Bitcoin blockchain, okay? And that copy of the Bitcoin blockchain is the Bitcoin software itself. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that makes sense. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible, but it's a little bit complicated. So you have different implementation layers in Bitcoin if you're running the software. So the first implementation of it is the entire blockchain itself. And then the second implementation that comes on top of it is the user interface to run, for example, your wallet software or anything. And because everybody is not interested to actually download the entire Bitcoin history on his computer, most people just use a software that connects to a remote server that has that copy, okay? If you do that, which is the majority of people, for example, if you use Ledger and you're using Ledger Live with your Ledger, the server that Ledger Live is connected to is not your server. It's somebody else's server. In this case, it's Ledger's server. It's the copy of the blockchain, of the Bitcoin blockchain of Ledger. Okay. Now, what does it mean to run a Bitcoin node? Running a Bitcoin node means that you go to an implementation of a Bitcoin software. Let's, for example, take Bitcoin Core. So you go to Bitcoin Core and you download this software. And by downloading this software, you essentially download the entire blockchain. Okay. So this is the website. So if you go to the official website of Bitcoin Core, you can download this software. And what this software does is it goes back to the Genesis block, so which is the first block in Bitcoin history. And it basically, let me add this to stage. So there it is. So if you download this software and if you run it on your computer, you're essentially going to start to download the entire blockchain from day zero until today. And instead of relying on somebody else's copy, you are verifying now the transactions yourself. You are running Bitcoin. That's what running Bitcoin means. And this is how Bitcoin gets distributed, right? Bitcoin does not get distributed by just buying it and holding it on Coinbase, or even buying it and withdrawing it to your own wallet. It actually gets distributed, or its consensus or its rules get distributed, not the coins, the rules of it. Okay, the rules of it get distributed the more people download a software like Bitcoin Core and run it on their computer. But it will take time, and it will take a lot of space on your computer. So not many people can do it, and a lot of people actually buy a separate computer to do it. You can buy a very cheap computer like a Raspberry Pi, and 1 terabyte of storage would do the job, because the entire blockchain is essentially under 1 terabyte. It's around 600 or 700 gigabyte. And you can run Bitcoin that way. I run my own node at home. I have a Raspberry Pi. And okay, so let's get rid of this fundamental question, what a Bitcoin software is and what it means to run it. So that's what it means. Downloading the entire blockchain into your computer is running Bitcoin, essentially. And then from there, you can, for example, use your Sparrow wallet, and your Sparrow wallet or your Sparrow software, or in our case, Liana, can connect to this node or to this copy of the blockchain, which is yours. You have it at home. Nobody can change that copy. It's not under somebody else's control, right? You are running it at home. One way of explaining this, and I'm going to move to Bitcoin Core versus other versions and the dramatic debate that is happening at the moment. One way of explaining what a Bitcoin node is, in my opinion, this is how I always explain this to newbies. Think of, so for example, if you go and buy gold, right? How do you know that the gold you bought is real, right? How do you know? The only way you can know is by using something that doesn't rely on trust, because otherwise you're either trusting the gold dealer who tells you that it's real, right? Or you have some device that actually checks the density of the gold bar or the coin, gold coin, and that's how you can verify the gold, right? Take this as an example and move it to Bitcoin now. If you are using, for example, Ledger Live, and you're not connecting Ledger Live to your own node at home, you are relying on the gold dealer, in this case, Ledger, right? You're not verifying the Bitcoin yourself. You are letting Ledger verify it for you. If you have your own copy of the Bitcoin blockchain, you essentially have this device that verifies the actual gold itself. So you have the device yourself, you know for sure, because you paid for the device, it's your device, you know the device is essentially a legit device, and it's going to tell you whether the gold is real or not. So instead of relying on the gold dealer telling you if it's real gold, you have your own device and you can check if the gold is actually real. So that's what essentially what it means to have a Bitcoin node, verifying transactions on your own and not trusting anybody else's Bitcoin copy. That's what it means. Okay. Now let's get rid of that. And now let's talk about the different implementations of this software. We have Bitcoin Core, and everybody knows Bitcoin Core. It's the most common version of Bitcoin. And it's basically the OG software that Satoshi created, right? Bitcoin Core is the oldest software and everybody knows it. But there can be different versions of Bitcoin Core. And these different versions can have slightly different rules on different levels, okay? Now, this debate that we have with op return limits and all these different implementations, or this new implementation they call Bitcoin knots, essentially the debate is the following. So the new version of Bitcoin Core, which is version 30, has a new standard which basically does not have any limit on data that you can attach to a transaction. To put it in very, very simple words, that's all this debate is about. And many people say that it's a bad thing, because if we start to accept absolutely no limit, then the network, the Bitcoin network, can become a network like Ethereum. And we don't want that, right? We want Bitcoin to be money. And by the way, I'm not trying to argue for or against Bitcoin Core's standards or their new version. I'm just trying to define the terms and make sure everybody understands both sides, and you understand if there is a problem, and if there is a problem, whether you should do something or you can do something. So we have the consensus layer. That's the layer where basically the most fundamental rules of Bitcoin are: the difficulty adjustment, how many Bitcoin will ever exist, the number of halvings, and so on and so forth. So this is like the consensus rules on Bitcoin, right? And then there is different type of policies that you have for the mempool. Okay, so what is the mempool? Let's discuss that also for a second. So let me go back and share with you, because this one is actually the best. There it is. Good. So what is the mempool? The mempool is essentially the place where people can tell the network what they want to do. So if I want to send, I don't know, 0.1 Bitcoin from my wallet to somebody else's wallet, and I use my node to do that, what I do is, the first thing I do, that's why everywhere on Bitcoin implementations, you see broadcast, okay? So you broadcast that transaction. For some reason, this is not loading, but let me try it one more time. There it is. Okay, now it's working. Okay, so finally, there we go. Okay, so you can see here on the right side, you have the blockchain, right? You have the copy of the blockchain. So this could be a copy that you have on your own node, or it could be a copy of someone else's node, right? But independent of that, what you see here is on the right side, you see all the confirmed blocks. So this is the chain that everybody talks about, the Bitcoin blockchain. The confirmed blocks that are already mined by the miners, and you cannot reverse them anymore. They're in the chain, they're unreversible. If you want to reverse them, you would have to basically 51% attack the network, right? Which is very, very expensive and difficult and not doable, right? What you see, however, on the left side is one second. So what you see on the left side of this mempool is basically every transaction that is waiting to be confirmed to the blockchain. You see, right now we just found the block, and basically the miners took the transactions that they would like to include in the next block, and the next lucky miner finds the next block and it gets confirmed to the network, and they tell every other computer or every node in the network, hey, we found this block, and then it gets mined and everybody knows, okay, this block is valid, and they copy the same block to their own copy of the blockchain. So this right side of this chain is identical on every single node, everywhere. It has to, right? Maybe the last block will differ for some time, but latest by 20 minutes or so, they will all look, they have to look identical. If not, that means you're not running Bitcoin, right? That's what the consensus is, that everybody has to have the same copy. Now, you can have different type of policies which transactions you want to include on the left side of this chain, right? Which is the mempool, the pool at which you accept transactions and send transactions out, right? Waiting to be confirmed. And this is the mempool policy that this debate is about. So Bitcoin Core has essentially removed a limit where you can actually attach very large files into your transaction. It could be a video, it could be a JPEG, it could be anything. And you could broadcast this into the mempool. And if the miner wants to include that in the next block, he could go ahead and do so, right? Then what you also have is a new implementation now, which is Bitcoin Knots. So Bitcoin Knots says, hey, we don't want that to happen. We want Bitcoin to be money, right? We don't want Bitcoin to be like Ethereum. We don't want spam being distributed on the network. We want only Bitcoin transactions, monetary transactions, to be broadcasted. So we're going to keep that limit that we believe is necessary so the network does not get full of spam. That's the argument of Bitcoin Knots, okay? Now, there is an argument that you could have done this before using Taproot, and it's true, through inscriptions, you could do that before, but using Taproot is not an official way to attach files to transactions, right? And this is where it gets tricky, right? Because the Bitcoin Core people say, well, it used to be possible, so why do we put any limit? Let's remove that limit, and everybody should be able to attach as much data as they want to their transaction and broadcast it to the network. And the best analogy, I think, to explain this from a perspective of Bitcoin Knots people is think of this scenario of having your home, okay? You have your home door lock open, okay? Anybody could enter your house. Or actually, sorry, let me change that metaphor. It's actually easier to understand if I change that slightly. So think of it this way. Imagine your door, your main entrance at your home, is actually closed and locked, okay? Now, imagine there is a window, however, that is not locked, and it's actually a window. The purpose of that window is just clean air, right? You just open it to have clean air, and that's it. That's the purpose of it, right? But it's not locked. So theoretically, somebody could break into your house by opening that window anytime. And now the Bitcoin Core people are saying, well, since the window is not locked, why are we locking the main entrance? Let's leave the main entrance also open. And you know what? Let's not even leave it open. Let's actually open the door and let everybody in. And the counter argument for that is, wait a second, we don't want that. Who is running his Bitcoin node at home, I don't want to store data that are, non-monetary data on my computer. That's not why I'm running Bitcoin. I'm running Bitcoin because it's money. I'm not running Bitcoin because it's a data storage database. That's not why I'm running it, right? So the debate is about that, okay? And the Knots people are very, very afraid that this could lead to a disaster where you could have all sorts of content on Bitcoin, and if you want to run it, you would be forced to download it, and it could be like all sorts of data. It could be CSAM, which is basically child like very sensitive child pornography stuff and sexual abuse material of children that could be put on chain, and you could not do anything about it. If enough people run it, then if you want to run Bitcoin, you would have to download that, right? And this is essentially the counter argument that they're making, and it is a concern. But at the same time, the counter argument goes where they say, well, there is nothing you can do, right? That's the counter argument. And yeah, so it's actually a very tricky situation, and we have to observe where this leads. I personally, I'm running Bitcoin Knots. Whether this is helping the situation or not. By the way, I don't believe Bitcoin is in any form of danger. I don't think that's the case. I think there is something about distributed networks that because they're distributed and because they're decentralized, there is certain things that you cannot do anything about. For example, spam, right? There is not much you can do. You can disincentivize people to not do it by making them do computational work, which Bitcoin does. Bitcoin does use proof of work, but still you could have malicious actors who are willing to expand their energy and actually do the work just to put spam and scams on this chain, right? And we don't want that. And I believe, and from here, I'm giving my opinion, I believe it is essential to try to minimize that as much as possible. There are certain things we cannot do anything about, but to be honest, if you ask me, yes, the window is true. The window is not locked, but by opening the door, the front door, and having everybody being able to look into my house, basically invites violence, right? It actually invites people to come in and actually steal my stuff, right? And I don't want that. So the argument here is not that it wasn't possible before. The argument here is, what standard do we want in Bitcoin? And what is the standard we want everybody to run? And are these standards the standards that represent Bitcoin or not? And if we all agree Bitcoin is money and Bitcoin is not supposed to be something like Ethereum, where you can put all sorts of stuff on its database, but money, then we can also agree that we should not have a system that is designed to attach data, large data, into transactions. That is my opinion. So I hope this was a good explanation of what this is about. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comment section below. We'll try to answer them in the next video. Thank you. Bye.